Welcoming you to a life of awareness, the Presence Project is excited for you to join us for today's podcast with your host, Paul Kersner.
Hello and welcome to episode 74 of Are You Being Present? My name is Paul. I want to welcome you to the present moment. I want to welcome you to the here and now, and I want to thank you wholeheartedly, sincerely, and deeply for joining me in this wonderful, beautiful, precious present moment. The title and topic for today's podcast is Following the Four Agreements with Presence. I wanted to dedicate a podcast to discuss the four agreements, what they are, and how they can really help improve your present seconds, your present moments, your state of being, your ability to be present. The Four Agreements is a book that was written by Don Miguel Ruiz a number of years ago that has really changed the lives of many, many people. I'm sure he sold millions of copies. And in it contains Toltec wisdom to help improve and guide people living in this dimension. It contains the seeds that we need to start awakening from societal programming, from awakening from the matrix. The Four Agreements is a book that I have recommended to many of my patients, and it is a book that I have read many times. It's a very quick read. It's a short book. But each page, each chapter contains so much wonderful information and knowledge that's so applicable to everything that's going on right now. It could be overlaid into almost every situation that's being presented. It contains the building blocks to create the foundation that we need for presence. Really, because what we need to do is untwine the societal programming that has been given to us. We have to awaken from the matrix. And after we do that, we need to figure out a way to move forward and build the strong foundation as we start to change and grow and exist with presence. I am a big fan of this book. I suggest to everyone listening to this podcast to read the Four Agreements. I suggest paperback, but digital version is fine as well. But I want to dig into each agreement and talk about how it has to do with presence, how I use it for my present moments, and how I talk about it with my patients who at times struggle with presence. The first agreement is be impeccable with your word. And that has a lot to do with speaking with integrity. This agreement suggests that we only say what we mean, that we avoid using the word to speak against ourselves or to gossip about others, and to use the power of our word or words in the direction of truth and love. I believe that this is an extremely important tenet of life, but I want to redirect us to understand that it is integral for you to be impeccable with your word to yourself first and foremost. I think it is important and very valuable to be impeccable with your word to others, but you must be able to keep your word to yourself. The way you talk to yourself, the way you talk with yourself, the way you talk about yourself, this is the key. This is a key. Because your internal state of being and in your internal dialogue will reflect outward. It doesn't work in the inverse. So when you read the Four Agreements and you dig into the first agreement about being impeccable with your word, please take a moment to think about keeping your word to yourself. So if you tell yourself that you're going to do something, do it. I think there's value in keeping your word to others and doing your best to live up to your commitments to others, telling someone you're going to do it and actually following up with it. But that is only second to doing and keeping your word to yourself. And that has a lot to do with being present, because if you can keep your word to yourself and with yourself, you become more aware and it becomes easier to exist within your present moments. There's no contradiction. When we tell ourselves that we're going to do something and then we don't do it and we put it off to the future, that becomes a real issue for us and between us in the relationship between ourselves. The being impeccable with our word has a lot to do with being impeccable with our word, with ourselves in the present moment. Now, you might tell yourself you're going to do something at a certain point in the future, but when that present second arrives, it's very important that you fulfill whatever commitment you made to yourself. And if we're being present, we're also watching all the words that we're using and how those words are affecting us in mind, body, and spirit. Each word has power. That is true. And I have heard and I believe that words are wishes. So we have to be very careful about the words we use, that we speak with, that we share to ourselves and also to others. This is a very important agreement and definitely takes time to look at, because I think there's the tendency to speak freely. There's a tendency to speak carelessly. There's a tendency to say things that we don't necessarily mean, but we say them anyway. There's a tendency to make commitments that we don't keep because either we don't really want to do it or we think we should do it. And that creates that contradiction, which creates friction, which really makes it difficult to be present. So it's important to really sit with this first agreement and think about, have I been impeccable with my word to myself? Am I following through with the things that I said that I would do, period? But again, I want to keep reframing and I want to keep pulling it back to you. Are you being impeccable with your word to yourself in the present moment? That is a great question. And if you're not, of course, let's be objective and constructive and look at what might be happening as to why you're not. Let's not be judgmental on why you're not keeping your word to yourself, but let's look at what's going on that's keeping you from being impeccable and how you can work on that to improve it so you feel better about that. When you keep your word to yourself, of course, that's going to help with your self-esteem. It's going to help the way that you see the world in general, because you feel better about how you're treating yourself, how you're interacting with yourself. And once that happens, it becomes a lot easier to navigate this reality and then, subsequently your relationship with others. So again, that first agreement, be impeccable with your word, be impeccable with your word to yourself in the present moment. The second agreement is don't take anything personally. Nothing others do is because of you. What other people say and do is a projection of their own reality, which is their own dream, their own living dream. When you are immune to the opinions and actions of others, you won't be the victim of needless suffering. This is actually one of my favorite agreements. I like them all, but this is one that I remind myself of, is that what other people say and do has very little to do with you. It's mere projection of their own reality, of their own egos. And in the Matrix, in societal programming, we are trained to put other people's opinion ahead of our own. We place extreme value in what other people think of us. That's how we define ourselves, and that is a negative motivator. I've shared some information with patients, and I'm going to share it with you. This has been my observation over the past 10 years that this clinic's been open, but I've been working with patients for about 13 years now. And again, my specialty is treating anxiety, stress, and depression. So I've sat in front of many patients. I've listened to many stories. I've interacted with many egos. The majority of people walking around on Earth really don't like themselves and are at war with themselves. They're at war with their ego. So why would you take someone else's opinion and care about what they think of you? You have to care about what you think about yourself first and foremost. It's nice if someone likes you or respects you, but what does that matter if you don't like or respect yourself? And it's going to be very difficult to get to the point where you like and respect yourself if you're taking things personally that other people say and do, especially because most people really don't like themselves for a variety of reasons, whether it's their past, whether it's their egos, whether it's their current circumstances. It doesn't make a difference. We have to learn how to set aside the projections of others and not to value it at all. And I'm not saying walk around and don't care about what anyone thinks or anything like that. There is value in the reflection of what other people have to say. So you should take note of it. But remember that what other people say and do has everything to do with them and not you. But you should still reflect upon the interactions that you're having. Let's always remember that it is what you think of you. It's how you talk to yourself. That's what really matters. Taking things personally, what part of you is taking offense to what other people are saying? It's your ego. Your ego is like a radar, and it's constantly looking for things to really affect you negatively, to get you stimulated, to get you into a state of reaction, so that you take it personally, and that so that your ego can use it against you. This agreement is really important because it helps give you some space and a little bit of a gap between the ego finding offense and taking things personally and using it against you. So again, remember, what other people say and do has very little to do with you. It's a projection of their own reality. It's not you, it's them. The third agreement is to not make assumptions, that you should find the courage to ask questions and to express what you really want. Communicating with others as clearly as you can to avoid misunderstanding, sadness, and drama is integral to not making assumptions. With this one agreement, you can completely transform your reality. Because what part of you do you think is making assumptions? Again, this is the ego. The ego is making assumptions. The ego is making stories. It's projecting into the future. The ego is making you think about your past and then making assumptions about the future. The ego is making you believe things that aren't true. And it does take courage to ask questions. But, I mean, you have to decide what path you want to choose. Do you want to suffer needlessly? Because making assumptions is self-inflicted suffering. Let me repeat that again. Making assumptions in your life is self-inflicted suffering. You can't tell me what someone else is thinking or feeling. It's impossible to guess. No one knows because people are extremely complicated. You're extremely complicated. Every present second contains so many different options that people are interacting and contending with at any given moment. So for you to make an assumption based on what you think someone might be thinking about you, it will only lead to a state of suffering, grief, sadness that is unnecessary. If you're being present, you can find the courage to ask a question about what someone else thinks, or at least to see things with more clarity so that you don't have to make an assumption. But then it's really important to make sure that you are being present, that you use all your present tools, that you see things, people, places, and things for who they are, how they are, and where they are. That way you don't allow your ego to make assumptions based on any preconceived notions that you have from the past or the future that contain a variety of emotions, which always interfere and interact with your state of being and your state of presence. So again, this agreement is vital to reducing and potentially eliminating self-inflicted suffering when it comes to making stories, which are assumptions. The fourth agreement, which is an extremely important agreement in my humble opinion, is always do your best. Your best is going to change from moment to moment. It will be different when you are healthy as opposed to unwell. Under any circumstance, simply do your best and you will avoid self-inflicted suffering. Man, that's a really important agreement that you have to make with yourself. Always do your best in the present moment. Always do your best with presence. Now, when we say your best, it's really important that you don't compare your best to your current best to a past best or to a potential future best. The ego will use comparison to make you feel bad or even better about yourself or someone else, but that has very little to do with what's actually happening in the moment. Doing your best in any given moment is integral as long as you are in the moment. Once you leave the moment, once you project yourself into the future, or you start thinking about all the things that you've done in the past, you lose your ability to do your best in the moment. And each moment, each present second is going to be different than the next. And you're going to have a different feeling space. In some present seconds, you might feel better than other present seconds. It's not important to compare one to the other. The only thing is that it's important for you to be able to recognize with presence, are you doing your best in that present moment? Once you're able to see that with clarity, you can feel better about the way that you're interacting and showing up with presence. This agreement is literally integral to living a life with presence. It's integral to create a solid foundation, because your best is variable. And as long as you're being present and you're not reflecting or projecting, you can do your best and not be judgmental. You can be objective with how you're showing up, because some moments are going to be very challenging and very difficult. But it's important not to gauge how you're doing, if you're doing your best, based on any other present second, because then you're just bringing present moments into your present moment and you're losing your presence. And I know that might sound a little convoluted, but if you zoom out a little bit, you can see that the present moment is all you have. And all we're asking you to do is show up fully and do the best that you can in that present moment with presence. To watch your ego, to watch your mind that might be being hard on you, that might make you think that you could be doing better, or that you're, whatever it is, whatever story it's creating for you, you have to pull yourself back, use all your presence tools, show up fully, and do the best that you can and leave it in that moment. Don't take it with you. Don't ruminate. Don't regret. There's nothing you can do once that present moment, once that present second has passed. You did your best. Now you're in a new present moment. Now you're in a new present second. And you can do your best all over again. That's the beauty of presence, is the fact that it's impermanent. And your best is going to vary from moment to moment, and you can leave your best past version alone and be your best present version. I hope that sharing the 4 agreements with you and overlaying it with presence has been helpful. It is wisdom that I value, that I treasure. It is a book that I've read countless times and I'll continue to read and talk about, because I believe that this is structural foundation for living a life filled with presence. These 4 agreements are agreements that you have with yourself, first and foremost, in the present moment. So I would suggest ordering a copy off Amazon, going to the bookstore. It doesn't matter where you get a copy of the 4 agreements. It just matters that you own a copy of it and that you read it, and that you don't skip through it, and that you really focus on each agreement individually, and then sit in silence. Think about how this agreement overlays into your reality. If you want to reflect back, be objective as to what has taken place. That's okay. But just don't be critical. Don't be hard on yourself. Don't let your ego make stories. Because you know an unguarded ego will always be judgmental, will always take you out of the present moment, will always make you think of things that aren't true, will create mental movies, stories, whatever it is, however it is. So I hope that you find this podcast helpful. I hope you go purchase a copy, or if you own a copy of the 4 agreements, that you take some time to reread it. If you have a presence partner, someone that you can share some of this information with, it's always helpful to discuss, to talk about how you can use these agreements. But remember that the 4 agreements are 4 agreements internally, first and foremost. Yes, they have to do with how you interact with reality and other people. But first and foremost, always reflect on how you're interacting with yourself in this present moment. So thank you so very much for listening, for sharing these present seconds with me, and I wish you nothing but peace.
Thank you for listening to the Are You Being Present podcast, brought to you by the Presence Projects. Remember, you have a choice. Choose to be present.